Hey YouTubers, the time has come to change the CV axle on my 2004 Subaru Outback. So, without further ado, let's get started. You'll notice I've already jacked the car up and I've got jack stands underneath it. And I've already loosened up these lug nuts with ratchet. And now I got the coolest little attachment that just makes this job go super fast. So check it out. I got this attachment right here that goes on my impact drill. So slide that in there, and then this attaches to my ratchet set, and watch how much time this shaves off. Make sure I organize these. Well, that was nice. Okay, now for the fun part. I got to get this center bolt off, and this is torqued on there really good. So you're going to need a breaker bar, but before I go and try to loosen that, I think I'll probably undo the brakes here. Now, the whole point of my videos, as you know, is to give step-by-step easy instructions for those who don't know what they're doing. I have only changed out one CV axle, actually two, in my life, and so feel free to comment if you see that I do something wrong to help other people out, but I will go ahead and show how I get this off for the less experienced among us. Okay, so I'm going to need a 14 millimeter ratchet, or socket, sorry, for my ratchet. Let's make sure you got a view of this. Move this around in here. There's a bolt right here and a bolt down here right now. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this one. That's my 14. These bolts tend to be on here pretty tight, so you kind of have to bump it a little bit while you do it. Like hit the ratchet to get it to loosen up and get that bolt started. There we go. Now I'm going to pull off the two large bolts I showed you earlier, and I'm going to need a 17 millimeter socket to do that. My ratchet didn't fit on there too well, so I've got this 17-inch wrench, and it'll fit on there a lot better. So just be careful you don't strip out your bolts trying to get a ratchet on there crooked. That's never good. Yeah, that's much better. Just get it started. There it goes. I'd recommend a geared wrench if you have one. I don't have a geared wrench in 17. There's the bolt, so you can see for yourself. It's got lots of grease, but it's pretty dirty, so I'm actually going to clean this one up. Now I'll get the other. Okay, so there we go. Oops, there goes my brake pad. So, I hope I didn't. You can see all that grease coated on there from my CV axle boot where it broke, and oh wow, look at that, it's worse than I even thought. So my boot was totally broken. Let me put that up there out of the way so it's not hanging on the hose. There's that other bolt. I need to clean that one up too. I'll use a brass brush for that. And then my rotor will just slide right off here. Okay, for your nut on the CV axle, you're going to want a 32 millimeter socket. Okay, so I'll put that on there, and just realize this is going to require a breaker bar. This is on there really, really tight. So I'm gonna get a breaker bar on this. Okay, so I wanted to show you, before you get the breaker bar on this, I've got this very long screwdriver here, very heavy duty, and I'm gonna put it between two of the studs, just like this, so that I have, now this is torquing, when I start torquing on the the nut here, this is going to hold the rotor in place. Without this, it'll just turn freely, right? So I need to have this placed in there in such a way that it can't move when I go to start torquing on it. So here we go. After analyzing this, I don't think the screwdriver is going to be sufficient. So I've got this extension for my ratchet set. It's very thick, and I'm also realizing I'm going to need to be very careful with the threads here. So I am just going to put this rag in here. There we go. Much better. Okay, I'm putting my full body weight on that, and I'm not budging it. So here's where I'm going to break out the breaker bar. This is the handle from my floor jack, and it has really come in handy on several occasions. You'll hear a big popping noise once it's broken loose. Oh, stay. Might be helpful to lock your steering wheel out. There it goes. Okay. So, I don't know if you heard the pop, but you'll certainly feel it. Just like that, there we go. Okay, well, now that I've gotten it loose, I can undo it with my fingers, set that aside, and that is part of the CV axle. It's the threads that come through. Okay, just for ease, convenience, and for your viewing convenience, I'm going to take off this dust brake / heat shield, just so you can see a little easier. I've literally never taken this off before. Disclaimer, I had to loosen each of these bolts with a ratchet before I was able to get my impact drill to take them off. There you go. Now the next thing that we have to tackle is this guy right here. So this is the steering rod, and there's a ball joint right here, and I want to loosen this ball joint. It's got these pins here, which amazingly I can take out with my fingers. Normally that requires pliers to do. So I'm going to loosen this, and then you have to be very careful. Hammer this screw down. Don't miss, or you'll hit the threads and you'll have to get a whole new thing. So just be very careful when you do that. I'll probably start with a mallet, and then if I have to use a hammer, I'll cover it with a cloth or wrap it with electrical tape and then hammer it, so even if I do miss, it won't screw it up. This is a 19 millimeter nut. So if I were you, I'd use a 6-point, not a 12-point socket on this. You'll be much less likely to strip out the nut that way if you use. I'm going to try wrapping this with electrical tape, and I actually got a rubber electrical tape, so it'll really, really protect it. Stretch it here so it sticks really well. And again, that's just so when I hammer on this, I don't want to screw up the threads on this ball joint. Otherwise, I'm going to have to get a whole new one, and that is a real pain in the neck. I don't want to have to deal with it. And then, just to be on the safe side, I'm also going to put a cloth, little rag over this. See what I mean? That sucker's really in there. Although I think I'm making headway here, so. Yep, there it goes. Okay, just popped that out, which is awesome. And that's kind of a pain. I guess that'll be easy to, oh, there you go. That's much easier to clean off. I may need to break out the breaker bar for this guy. Ooh, and word to the wise, now that this is loose, maybe do this in a different order than I did it in. Maybe take those off first. There it goes. Man, that was on there tight. Whew. Holy moly. Okay, same thing with this guy. There it goes. Okay. Now it's spinning on this side, so you got to hold this with a wrench on this side while you undo it on this side, and that's fine. I won't bore you with the details of that. I'm just going to get on it and do it, and when we come back, this will all be done. Okay. So next up is this guy right here. Let me try to get the light a little better. There you go. Now you can see. So this is the ball joint for the lower control arm. I'm going to pull this pin right there out, and then I'm going to unscrew this bolt here, wrap it in electrical tape, hammer it out just like I did the tie rod, and then I can take off this whole piece will come off this way, and then I can swap out my control arm. So if you're not filming, all told to this point, I probably would have spent, I don't know, maybe half an hour total, 20 to 30 minutes, somewhere in there. And that includes jacking the car up and everything. This is a very straightforward, easy job. It's just intimidating if you've never done it before, but if you have step-by-step directions, this is pretty simple. So I can't really get a good angle when I film this. So just know the next time we come back, I will have undone this whole thing, and we'll go from there. Okay, a lot has happened since the last time I recorded. So let me just zoom out. This was a nightmare to get that bottom ball joint out, and it took me, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours of working on it. And I will tell you what I learned from that experience. Number one, this tool is pretty much useless. It never gets on it straight. It's always like at an angle. And once you start putting tension on it, I mean, it'll start out straight, but then you start putting tension on it, and this thing starts to canter one way or the other. And so that didn't work for me. Then I hammered on the side here. Let's see if we can get a little better light. Maybe. I hammered this side, then I hammered this side. Same thing, was just, I don't know, spitting in the wind basically. It wasn't working. And so finally I got on YouTube and I saw a video where somebody had this tool. This thing is amazing. I bought it at Harbor Freight. It was, I don't know, $15 or maybe it was 20, but I think it was more like 15, 16. So after working on that stupid ball joint for, 4 hours straight, I finally broke down, went to Harbor Freight, bought this tool, had it off within 1 minute, literally 1 minute. This is the best tool of all time for pressing out a ball joint. So you just put the forked part on top, and then the bottom tooth. I'm holding the camera here, so here, let me just put this down. This part here is what actually goes on the bottom of the ball joint, the bolt sticking out, and then you just crank this with your ratchet, and it pushes that jaw up like that, and it popped right out. I mean, it was amazing. So learn from me. Don't go through all the frustration I went through. Go to Harbor Freight. I checked at Tractor Supply. They didn't have this. So go to Harbor Freight. Get this exact tool. Don't get anything else. This is the one that works. And you will save yourself a lot of hassle. So, and by the way, I'm not affiliated with Harbor Freight in any way. So this is just me being a very satisfied customer, and this tool works phenomenally well. As soon as you pop out that bottom ball joint, which you can see I totally mangled mine, right? Do you see the boot hanging off that? So I have to replace that now, and if I'd had that tool I told you about from the get-go, I wouldn't have damaged this in the slightest. So now that pops out, and now your CV axle should just pull, kind of wiggle it a little bit, pull right out of this assembly. I think this is called the hub. There we go. Put the hub up here. I don't want any pressure on this line here. I think that's my anti-lock brake system. Okay, now here's my CV axle. You know what, I may as well just rest that right like that. There we go. Now the CV axle's loose just on this end. So make sure you can see that. So now I'm going to crawl up underneath the car, and this part's really easy if you do it the right way, and it's really tedious if you do it the wrong way. And this is me speaking from experience, so let me pass on to you what I learned. So before we get into this underneath the car, where I'm about to take you there, I used this extension to my ratchet set, and this is for a 1/2-inch drive. It's a big, heavy-duty, burly piece of steel, and if you have something like this, this is the best. I had that big screwdriver you saw earlier in the video, and that was not sufficient. I couldn't get the torque I needed. This was perfect. So let's go up under the car, and there is the CV axle where it goes into the transmission. Now, as you can see, I've already separated mine, and I apologize. I didn't do that on video. I got a little excited. But here's where you're going to torque this thing. So right here, and you're going to use the transmission body, and then this part here, this edge right here on the CV axle itself, and you're going to stick your bar up in there and then torque against the transmission body. Do not, I repeat, do not torque against the exhaust. You're going to dent your exhaust if you do that. So stick it in there, and if you're doing it right, it should pop out just 1 or 2 tries. It's not incredibly difficult. You just have to get the right angle and just be careful here. So to orient you, this is my transmission fluid oil filter, and that's where the CV axle, here, if I turn it upside, maybe that's makes it worse for you. Let me come this way. I don't know if you can still see that. I can't see the camera screen. But anyway, there's a snap ring on there, and you have to get it past the snap ring, and that's why you have to pry this out. If you just try to pull on this, you're going to be at this forever. It's very hard. Okay, you'll feel it. It'll pop, and then it just pulls out. Super easy. So I'll take you top side and show you that. Okay, so now that I've popped that loose, this should just come right out. There it goes. And that is that. Here's why I had to replace my CV axle. Look at that boot. Now, somebody's undoubtedly going to comment, you can just change out the boot, but I wanted to do the whole axle. It's pretty old. This has, I don't know, 209,000 miles on it now, so I thought it was time for a new one. So that's gone, and now I'll put the new one in. But before I do that, I didn't anticipate doing this, but I have to get a new ball joint here, and my struts are really old, and my control arm bushings are totally messed up. So I decided to replace my entire lower control arm and the strut here. So if you're not interested in that part, I've shown you everything you need to know. At this point, you can just put in the new axle and you're done. If you want to stick around for the lower control arm and the new ball joint and the strut, then stay tuned. We'll get to that next. Okay, I just want to mention one last thing before we get going. Up to this point, had I had the right tools from the get-go, at this point I would be about half an hour to 45 minutes in. This is very straightforward, and obviously filming it takes me longer, so but if I wasn't filming and I was just doing the work and I had all the right tools from the get-go, this is 45 minutes of work, tops. I mean, if you're quick, half an hour to get to this point. So now I'm going to take off this guy because I'm going to have to work on getting this ball joint down here out. So I need to disconnect my analog brake system. Oh man, that's on there tight. There it goes. Okay, let's see if this will come out. Yes, it does. Perfect. Now I can take this off completely, and it's just out of my way. Now I'm going to take this guy off. I think it's the same thing. It's 12. Okay, so when I tried to spin this, there's a nut on the back side that you have to hold sturdy or else it'll just twist. So let's try this again. Okay, same thing on this side. You got a nut here on the back side, although this one may be welded, so looks like it is, but it's hard to say. Loosen it up with the impact drill. Let's see if we can get it now. Oh, there it goes. Life easier. Okay, that strut is totally free now. Okay, well, now that I have that strut assembly completely separate from everything in the wheel well, now there's just these 3 bolts up here that I undo, and this whole thing will just pull out. So this is the easy part. Although these are looking a little bit corroded, so I'm going to throw some PB Blaster on them. I'm trying to unscrew these. Okay, this is pretty straightforward. This is just a 12 millimeter. I sprayed it, wiped it up a little bit, and oh yeah, it's not on there very tight at all. In fact, I should be able to do that. Once I break them loose, I should be able to just do that with my impact drill. Oh, that is so sweet. Saves so much time. Oh, we gotta hold the strut. The strut just fell. And there you go. There is a very old strut in need of replacement. Well, here's the new control arm that I'm putting in. I figured it'd be easier to show you on this than in the car just because of the light. But notice there's 3 points of contact here. There's this bushing here, which comes with the control arm, and then this part here you need to buy a new bushing for, so that'll slide into this, and this will bolt on underneath the car right there, and then that just slides in. And then you've got an assembly right here where the sway bar attaches. So there's 3 large bolts, and I'm going to go ahead and spray those right now with good old-fashioned PB Blaster. Okay, well, I got the new struts in. And by the way, I didn't show that. Just pop the hood, and you'll see 3 bolts right above this. And literally, it's super easy. Just take off the 3 bolts. They shouldn't be rusted or anything. And make sure you're holding this, because when you disconnect all 3, the old one will fall down if you're not holding it. So disconnect those, put the new one in, and do the bolts up, and that's it. It's very simple. So that's the whole reason I did this project, was just so I could change the strut, but I ended up having to replace my lower control arm, And my CV axles needed to be replaced as well, which was actually, I think the CV axle was the whole reason I did all this, and I figured, well, while I'm in there, I may as well do the strut. So I got a quick strut pre-assembled. I didn't have to do the compression on the spring. I got it online. Just look on Amazon. I found a very good deal. I'm sure there's like Parts Geek or something like that, lots of places where you can find these parts that you need. But let me just take you through what I did. So you saw me do the CV axle, the lower control arm, and I apologize I didn't have camera rolling while I did this, but it's so easy. I'm just going to take you underneath the car here. I also replaced this bushing, and as you can see, I haven't tightened this down yet, but I will. So I replaced this entire bushing, the whole lower control arm, CV axle, and the strut. And I'll probably get around to replacing, let's see if I can get a better camera angle here. Sorry, it's kind of bright outside. This bushing right here, that just goes between the sway bar and the lower control arm. So I'll probably swap that out, although it looks like it's doing okay. So I did the same thing on both sides. As you can see, brand new CV axle, brand new strut. Let's see if we're still getting good video here. Brand new strut here, and same thing. Let me take you underneath. New bushing, new lower control arm, and so yeah, this. Oh, and keep in mind that the lower control arm right here, on this side it comes with a bushing already pressed in here. So you've got really two new bushings, but you only have to install this one right here. Okay, so I've had quite the adventure since then. Thanks to that awesome tool, I was able to get the ball joint out of the lower control arm, but now I need to get the ball joint out of the knuckle joint here. And as you can see, you've got this bolt that comes in this way and comes through here. And if yours is anything like mine, it's incredibly rusted. And so we are going to have to get serious with a torch here, see if we can heat it up. The idea with the torch is it expands the metal. Oh, by the way, you can get this for 20 bucks at Home Depot, or I'm sure Lowe's, or wherever. But you heat the metal and it'll expand as it gets hot, and that the idea is that you kind of break the bond between the rusted bolt and the receiving threads here. So without further ado, let's do this. I'm going to heat this up pretty hot, and then we're going to spray oil on it. And just like when you're soldering a joint, the cool oil will be sucked up into the threads, just like when you're like soldering copper pipes together. That's the hope. So obviously I've already soaked this a lot with oil, and I think it's smart to also tap it with a hammer to try to start loosening up the rust and break up the rust. But you got to be really careful with this bolt. You don't want to just crank on it, because it's only a 14 millimeter bolt, and chances are good you will strip the head off, and then you have the nightmare of trying to drill and then tap the bolt and see if you can screw it out that way. And I don't know, maybe my technique's not good with that, but I rarely am successful with it. Okay, so here's my new knuckle joint, also called the axle bearing housing. If you're trying to find it online, it will not come up as under knuckle joint. So for me, I had to replace mine because when I took out the bolt that holds the ball joint right here, this piece right here was completely cracked on the old one. And so the other, it was just so badly rusted. Now, just a little background on me. Yours probably won't be as rusted as mine, but I lived in Utah the whole time I had this car, and there's a lot of snow and a lot of salt that they put on the roads, and I did not have a garage, so it wasn't garage kept. So it just got really, really badly rusted. So hopefully you'll be able to salvage yours. But this is where I'm going to put my new knuckle joint, or sorry, my new ball joint. So here's the protective covering on it. So you're supposed to install this first, and then, here, let me move the camera a little, make sure we get a good angle of this. And then now I'm gonna put the screw in here and torque this down. So make sure, if you got a new bolt like I did, that you also get washers. So went to the dealer, got this bolt just to make sure I had the correct one, but they did not have washers for it. It's just, you know, any zinc coated washer that fits this bolt. I believe this was a 3/8 washer, and it's the perfect size. Okay, I'm referring to the Haynes repair manual, and granted, this is the 1990 through 99. I actually could not find a 2004, but it's almost the exact same body type, so I'm going off this. So please feel free to comment below if there's a different torque specification that you find. But I'm just going to show you the torque specification here. This steering knuckle to ball joint pinch bolt, that should be 28 to 37 foot-pounds. So I just didn't want you to take my word for it, wanted to show you. So I'm going to get my torque wrench and go in that range. I'll just arbitrarily choose 35. So hopefully you can see my selector here. Notice here it says foot-pounds, and if you rotate on the other side, it says Newton meters. I don't even know if you'll be able to see that on the camera, but I'm trying here, folks. So there's 30, and there's 40 on the right side, and they just have lines. So I'm going to choose 35. So right now the 0 is aligned in the middle, so I'm right at 30. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now that 5 is aligned right in the middle, so that's 35 pounds. I'm going to lock this. Now I can remove this sleeve, the safety sleeve on the ball joint. So I'll take off the castle nut and the washer, and I'll just pull that sleeve off. Okay. I'm going to do the other one. You don't need to watch me do both, so I'm going to do the other one, and then we'll start filming again when I get this knuckle back in. Oh, also, I am going to be hammering out all the old wheel studs, and I'll put in new wheel studs. I don't really feel like I need to show that either. Literally, you just hammer it, and it'll come out. I'm going to put the new ones in the freezer, so when you cool metal, it constricts, and it'll make it go in there a little easier. Simply, I've got a whole video on how to replace a wheel stud, so refer to that if you're having any problems. But I'm going to replace all the wheel studs, and then we'll go from there. Okay, well, I told you I wasn't going to film this, and I changed my mind. So when I go to put this in, it got stuck right there, and I want to make sure that everybody can see this. So see how there's this rim right here, this lower rim, the black part is what my finger's touching. That needs to be flush with this surface. So if you get it there and it gives you resistance like it did with me, that's not in. You got to push it, wiggle it. There it is. Now it's all the way flush. That is a good placement. Now I'll put the bolt in and go from there. All right. Okay. Well, make sure you put in the correct knuckle joint. Obviously, they only work on one side. They are mirror images of each other, so they're not interchangeable is what I'm trying to say. Easiest way to tell, on the driver's side, it'll look like this, right? You've got the long stem for the strut, and then you've got this stem over here for the tie rod. And then this is a dead giveaway as well. Right here, that's where your anti-lock brake system goes in. And that will be on the left side, and just like over here, there should be this little bracket for the anti-lock brake system to go on, and it just fits there perfectly. The other side is for the brake line, and it's got that little notch like that. So the first thing that goes on is the CV axle. The grease definitely helped. Look at that. That was easy. Now, I'm going to line it up with the strut, and I'm aiming the bottom of the ball joint. Now, obviously, I've taken the castle nut off the ball joint. Okay. Actually, before I even do that, I better, yep. Move this out of the way. Get the ball joint in, and then connect the strut. Ah, that's much better. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, tighten this castle nut down here to the 29 foot-pounds of torque, like the Haynes manual specifies. So this bolt was starting to get a little bit rusted, so I just, again, put high-temperature grease on it. But notice the profile of this bolt. Notice it's got a little bump up right there. So this bolt, and I'm on the driver's side right now, needs to come in from this direction, and it'll only fit one way. You'll know when you've got it. We'll come in the same direction. I've also greased it up with a little bit of high temperature grease, just a nice thin coat to keep it from rusting and just keep everything nice and lubricated in there. Okay. Both those bolts are in. Notice in the illustration here that it's showing the washer going on the top bolt on the nut side. So there's the nut, there's the washer, and there's the bolt. So it is on the top one and it does go on the nut side, so I guessed correctly. This one doesn't have a washer, it just goes on the bottom. Okay. I'm looking again in the Haynes manual. Sorry, this is hard to hold the camera and the manual at the same time. We're looking down here, second to bottom item, strut to steering knuckle bolts nuts. And you'll see that the specification for that is 98 to 119 foot-pounds of torque. I'm going to go to 110, but anywhere in that range is appropriate. So actually maybe I'll do 115 just to be on the safe side. Okay. So now we got to do the tie rod, and according, as you can see here, the tie rod end to steering knuckle joint, or tie rod end to steering knuckle nut, excuse me, is 19 to 21 foot-pounds of torque, if you can see that. So that's this guy right here, and that's going to go in on the bottom side of the knuckle right here. So I'm going to put that in, 19 to 21. I'm just going to split the difference and do 20. And that'll be with a castle nut. So you are looking for this guy, this guy right here. And here's one thing I love about doing my own work on my car. This was rusted pretty bad, and it still is, you can see, but I took a steel brush to it, and I'll put some grease on it. Not a lot, just a very little bit of grease on that, and it's stuff like that the mechanic's never going to do for you. And to me, that's going to make that last longer. It'll prevent it from rusting, and it'll make it easier to work on in the future. So I'm not saying you should do that or you have to do that, but I am going to do that. Okay, Chapter 8 of the Haynes manual shows torque specifications, and we're looking at the drive axle nut, front and rear. Notice that's let me zoom in here, 123 to 151. So I'm going to take that to 145, 150. Probably 145, since 151 is the very most it should be done. So 145 foot-pounds of torque on my torque wrench, and then I should be ready to put the brakes on and get the wheel back on. Okay, so before I reinstall my brake mounts and calipers, I'm going to just clean up these bolts. As you can see, that's pretty grimy. And I'm noticing here this boot, it's fairly damaged, and so I'm guessing I need to replace that, although it's too late tonight. So I'm going to clean this up, and I'll I'll install this, but then maybe in the next week or so I'm going to go buy a new boot, just because I don't want this to stick at all, or that'll prematurely wear my brake pads. So just want to make sure I'm going to totally clean this up, get some degreaser on it, get it shining, and it should be nice and smooth as it works inside of the bracket here. And yeah, so I will go from there, and I'm just going to clean all this up. No reason for you to see that on the video. So the next time you see me, actually this will probably be it. You don't really need to watch me install my brakes. So this may be about the last part that I'll do. You've already seen me put on the one knuckle joint, so now just repeat the procedure for the other side. And best of luck to you guys. So I will do, I'll show you the car when it's all done, and that'll be pretty much it. All right. Okay, so I pulled out my brake pins, and they were pretty gunked up, so as you can see, I've really cleaned this off. I even sprayed inside of here with some gel degreaser, which you can get at, you know, any AutoZone, and it doesn't have to be this brand. I'm not trying to advertise for them, but this worked very well for me. I imagine O'Reilly's has this, Pet Boys, Checker, you know, I'm sure everybody's got it, or a variation of it. And then I took Q-tips, and there's my pile of Q-tips. Don't know if you can see that or not. And just really got it clean in there. And now I'm going to get my Ultra Disc brake caliper lube on this, and just try to really get this going. Now this has a boot that goes on it, and if you'll notice, my boot is damaged. So I'm going to have to take that to, I'm going to have to go get a new boot, but I don't have time tonight, so I'm going to put this on, and then I'll do it in the next week or so. I'll put a new boot on here so that it's working properly. You want to make sure, I mean, your brakes, your life depends on your brakes, right? So you just want to make sure that everything is done correctly. So anyway, I'd really advocate that each of you takes just, you know, it'll take you 10 minutes to clean your brakes up and just do it right, make them look real nice. Get them really lubricated and nice and clean, of course, and then you don't have to worry about your car functioning properly. All right, well, I'm going to finish this up, and we'll go from there. Thanks. A lot of my friends ask me why I do so much work on my car, and they don't understand why I don't just take it in and have some shop do the maintenance on it. It would save me a lot of time, and that's true. First and foremost, I think the number one reason to do it is to save money. So there's the financial aspect on this job. I mean, I ended up doing so much, both lower control arms, both CV axles, both struts. I turned the rotors, put new brakes on. Four out of the 5 wheel studs on both sides are new. New bushings, 2 new bushings, new ball joint. I mean, this was a pretty big overhaul of the whole front end of my car. So doing this job myself, I saved about $2,800, which is awesome. It took longer than I expected because I was waiting on parts that I didn't know I was going to have. Oh, I forgot. 2 new knuckle joints. So, and new wheel bearings. So that was the biggest thing. I did not realize I was going to have to replace the knuckle joints. And so it was a little bit frustrating, but you know, I'm very confident now in what I've got, and this will go many, many more miles. My goal is to get this car to 500,000 miles, and right now I'm closing in on 250,000, so halfway there anyway. So to my next point of why I think people should do this, it gives you skills and knowledge. You feel confident working on your car. If something breaks, I'm not at the mercy of a mechanic. If I choose to go to a mechanic, that's one thing, but I'm not forced to go to a mechanic. I can do it all myself. This gives me confidence when I go on long road trips, that I can take care of my family and that everything will be okay. Also gives me pride in my vehicle, and the fact of the matter is it's a more sustainable lifestyle. So because I choose to fix my car rather than just junking it and buying a new car, again, many of my friends have told me, Chad, why don't you just buy a whole new car? Instead of, you know, I probably spent about $1,200 on this project total. Maybe a little less than that, actually. It was probably closer to $1,000, but still, that's a lot of money. But $1,000 is much cheaper than a whole new car would be. So, all in all, the fact that I'm able to learn so much, feel confident with my car, it's more sustainable than just buying a new car. I don't feel like I'm getting gouged by a mechanic on prices. And then maybe one of the most important things is I know that the job is getting done correctly. I'm taking my time and doing the best job that I can possibly do. I don't cut corners. I use the best materials that I can find. So all in all, I'm very happy with the work that I've done and the way that the job turned out. So I'll close on this last note. The whole point of me doing these videos is not that I'm an expert and I'm showing everybody how it's supposed to be done. On the contrary, the whole point of my videos is I'm not an expert, and oftentimes I don't know what I'm doing. But that's the whole point. You can learn to do this work yourselves. And if a regular guy like me can do this and fix his car and get it running, not just getting it running, but getting it running well, so can you. So please feel free to comment if you saw that I did anything that I should not have done. Let me know. I'm looking to learn. But the main basis of these videos is to demonstrate to people that we can all do this. We are all capable of working on our cars. So I'm going to torque these down to the specified torque. So I'm very happy that the way this job went, and I am not making these videos to show everybody how this is supposed to be done. I'm making these videos as a guy who admits that I'm not an expert, and I want to show you that a lot of the times I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm still able to complete the job. And if I don't know what I'm doing, it's very easy to find the information I need, whether it's from the Haynes manual or talk forums on the internet or YouTube videos like this one. So if I can do it, you can do it. That's the point of these videos. Well, that's it for this time, guys. I'm Chad Walquist, and as always, I am the best I can. Thanks.